Guys, welcome into the Strengthen the Things That Remain podcast. We sure are glad that you've joined us today. To my right, as always, the famous evangelist. I'm trying to be nice. I really am trying to be nice. Todd McKeon. I wanted to call him my little buddy, but he gets offended when I call him my little buddy. And to my left,
ain't nobody wants to be his buddy. That's why.
Yeah. The pastor of the Gateway Baptist Church down in Bowling Springs, my friend Davey Shelton. Amen. We're glad that you're with us today, preacher. And we've got we're starting a podcast off a little different now. We've got 7 rapid fire questions that we ask everybody. Right. We didn't send them to you because we want just top of your mind,
rapid fire, yeah.
Top of your mind answer. Okay. Number 1, your favorite study Bible.
I really don't have one.
That's an acceptable answer. Do you normally just use just a clean text Bible?
Yes, sir, most of the time.
Okay,
that's what these are. The church.
Have you always been like that? Have you always been like that?
No, originally when I started preaching 39 years ago this week, I was using a Thompson chain.
Right.
That's what I had.
Right.
But over the years, I just clean text, and that's all.
Yep. That's what I used to.
Yeah.
Favorite author to read after?
Lehman Strauss.
I love him too.
That's one of my favorites.
Matter of fact, I'm preaching through the book of Revelation right now, and I'm using his book. His book on Revelation.
Excellent.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's fantastic. When you're doing your study, do you use digital format or do you like a book in your hand?
I'm a book,
right?
Paper, pen, book fella.
Okay.
I'm not too up on all the technology real well.
Right.
So.
Right. Person other than Christ that has had the most profound impact on your life.
My pastor, BP Boyle.
I knew you was going to say. I was thinking about that on the way up here. I said he's going to Brother BP.
Yeah,
man.
Hands down.
Yeah,
hands down. Matter of fact, in my last book I put out, I have a tribute to him in that book.
Amen. He was a great preacher.
Yes, sir.
Advice that you would give to your younger self if you go back to the 30-year-old Davey and tell him one thing, you had one piece of advice you could give him, what would it be?
Let's see. I can tell you more what I've done wrong, but I would have tried when I was younger. I'm grounded in Scripture, but I'd like to have had more Bible college training.
Okay.
By that time.
Very good, very good. And I'm assuming we already know the answer to this because what you said there earlier. But when you're preaching, do you use iPad, notebook, loose paper, wide margin? How do you usually do notes?
At the church I pastor, I have a notebook through ring binder, small thing that I use on the road. I use a wide margin where everything's written in the column of the Bible.
Right. Use basically a skeleton outline.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sometimes I can have a more detailed outline, but 90% of the time I'm 3 points.
But it's just a skeleton.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Just enough to know where I'm going next. That's about as far as it is.
And our last question is, other than Christ, your favorite Bible character?
Elijah.
Amen. So we've brought you on today, preacher, to talk about the relationship between the pastor and the evangelist.
Okay.
Some things, and you have a unique perspective because you're able to look at it from both ends.
Yes, sir.
You have been, of course, you're now a full-time pastor that does a lot of evangelist work.
Right.
And you have been a full-time on-the-road evangelist.
How long was you in evangelism full-time?
Full-time 5 years.
5 years.
That was just in between Pleasant Valley where I pastor and where I'm at now.
Right. So, and you wrote a book on it.
Yes, sir.
The do's and don'ts. Talking about how to treat the pastor to treat the evangelist.
Yes, sir.
So let's start with that perspective.
Okay.
Some things that the pastor should keep in mind when bringing in the evangelist.
Well, may I ask another question before we go that direction?
All right.
So you pastored for several years, and then you preached a lot of meetings then.
Yes, sir, did.
And then you resigned and went into full-time evangelism.
That's correct.
And then you're back to pastoring, and then you still preach a lot of meetings.
Yes, sir.
Okay, when you resigned your church and went into full-time evangelism, though you had preached a lot of meetings, did you learn some things maybe that you didn't know before during those 5 years when it was just evangelism? Did you look at some things different? Did you learn some things that you didn't?
Yes, sir, I did. Several things. I was glad I did some things before I went in, but I'd learned several more things. Life on the road is a lot different than a lot of men realize.
Well, let's talk about that. So
Okay.
from the pastor's point of view, just give us some things. What's the first thing, the big thing that stuck out to you when you became an evangelist? You're like, oh boy, I wish every pastor knew this about evangelism.
Road expense is very high. It's even higher now, naturally, than it was when I was a full-time evangelist. When I went into full-time evangelism, we bought a diesel truck, bought a fifth wheel. That was home for the first 3 years. There was no other home. That was the home. Then we got busy enough, I parked it and went back to stay in hotels. But road expense is very high. It is. Diesel was over $3 back then, and you know where it is now.
Right.
And if a man, particularly if he is pulling a fifth wheel or if he's driving a motorhome or a bus, diesel expense is very high.
Yeah.
It's not cheap. If you're doing any of those things, there's only certain restaurants you can pull into on the road. A lot of your fast food's totally out. You can't even get a rig into some parking lots. Right. But the road expense is high with your food, and you're going to have to do laundry somewhere. You got to, if you're in a fifth wheel, it's winter time. You got propane tanks you have to keep fueled up. You've got the wear and tear on your vehicles that you got to contend with. Those types of things are pretty. Yeah, I wish I knew more about it. I felt like I did pretty good at it, and I did as a pastor prior to that. But there's things I would have done more than I do now.
Just on that subject, if somebody's going into evangelism, would you recommend going down the pull the trailer, drive a bus route? Or would you say just forget all that and stay in motels?
I prefer, personally, I like the hotel a whole lot better than I did pulling a fifth wheel.
Right.
I did the fifth wheel, and the preacher needs to consider this for his family's sake. It gave my family a little bit more of a normal life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They slept in the same bed. They were able to keep their stuff where they wanted it. Those types of things.
That is a big expense. Well, I've looked into that, actually, doing that.
Yeah.
That's a big expense.
And starting that, you're probably going to have to, be honest with you, because of until you get your calendar really scheduled out a long way, you're going to have a lot of gaps.
Right, where you got to have someplace to stay.
Got to have a place to stay. Yeah. So.
Well, did you run into pastors that when you pulled in with your fifth wheel, they thought, "Oh, wow, we don't have to pay for a motel. That's great."
That's the number one thing that happens.
Yeah.
Number one thing.
Yeah, and so they just don't give you any extra toward the.
No, so they 95% of them will not.
Right.
You can fly, and they'll pay for your plane ticket.
Right.
But if you bring a bus, motorhome, fifth wheel, they do not. Most of them don't do anything.
No, so something that pastors should think about is traveling expense.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So when you're dealing with travel and expense and all these things, so I guess what I'm trying to say is
how do you judge that?
Right. What's the money? I mean, how do you figure on that?
Case by case, or
yes, sir. Especially in the beginning when you're starting. Like I said, the busier you get, you'll know what to do with saving money and other things, but you've got to do that, preparing for those days where there's no meetings, or go to somewhere where they just haven't thought, and you're going to have to be at a lot of money to eat or whatever it might be.
Right.
No, like if you're bringing a man in,
Yeah.
do you look at like how you're going to take care of him? Do you look at it case by case? Like if he has a fifth wheel and he's coming in, he's a preacher, I have this, because you know about that.
Yeah.
Do you take care of him differently than you would a man that you put in a motel, or maybe even a local man, or do you try to, is it pretty much?
I do straight across the board. I make sure we take care of a man, whether he's a pastor or full-time evangelist, comes preach for me. exceptionally well because of knowing the road expense. We'll give love offering out of the church and then take up love offering as well. So I do cross the board. If I know he's got a need, I would mention that even before he came.
Right. Well, one thing that I have done, I've not put too many preachers up that brought in a trailer. Normally I put them in a motel. But if they do, I have done it occasionally. Chris Hazelup, he likes to stay in a camper.
Does.
And so what I did that week, he said, I've already got a campground. I know where I'm going to stay. It's someplace I can ride my bike. And so what I did that week is what we normally pay for a motel. I just gave it to Brother Chris.
Absolutely.
If we pay, normally if we pay $800 or whatever for the motel for that week, I just gave him that $800 to pay toward his camper.
That's what I'd recommend doing to any pastor.
Now, some churches are more equipped at really taking care of a man than others.
Absolutely.
No question. How would you say to a small church that maybe don't have the budget that a larger church does? Maybe your church. I know you have a little bit of a larger church.
Yes, sir.
Maybe a small church that doesn't have the budget that y'all have, don't have the income, so to speak, that y'all have. How would you, because I know some men will say, well, we just can't do that.
Yeah.
So how would you answer that?
My answer for that is pretty simple, which I learned on the road from a pastor that I preach meetings for. A small church, if it's 20 or 30 people, can have any preacher in America and can take well care of him if they would just take up special offerings leading up to the meeting. On your Sunday mornings, have whether you do a change offering or just pass the plate and say, well, put in where we've got preacher so-and-so coming and they're coming in 6 months or whatever it is. You can plan, and you also prepare for the meal situation, his place to stay. The pastor that taught me that I was with on the road so much, he'd have everything took care of before I arrived.
Right.
All the meals, he knew how many people was in my family, so he knew what the expense was going to be to go out to eat. So that they took that up, it's paid. We have stayed in hotels with that man, so that hotel bill was paid before we got there. And even my main love offering he had took up before I got there, and then he would pass a plate.
I was going to mention that right there. We do like y'all. I pay a set amount. Our church typically pays $250 a service. But what we'll do is we'll pass an offering plate every service, and I'll tell them, look, every dime goes to the preacher, and I literally just fold the cash up and take it and hand him the cash. I don't put it in the bank and write him a check.
That's me too.
I just hand him the cash. Whatever it is, he gets it. And typically it'll run $300. So that ends up with being about $550 a service.
Yes, sir.
Which is above and beyond what it's been my experience that most churches pay, and that's okay because what I always tell our church is, these guys go places where they don't get nothing.
That's right.
So we need to try to make up for some of those places. But back to what I was trying to say, I preached a meeting a few weeks ago in a dear little church, but it's a small work. They've got a nice building, but they have some debt, and so they're working through that. Long story short, they don't have any money. So what the pastor did is he just took up a love offering for me every night. At the end of that, they took it and wrote me a check. At the end of the week, and it was just from the love offerings, they wrote me a check for $1,400. Okay, well, that is more than what I've gotten in a lot of places that had bigger congregations. And they did it by just taking up the money. It's just that simple. And sometimes I hear pastors say, well, I don't want to take up an offering every night. Well, people want to help. They want to be a part and help.
They do. Gene Edwards taught me that many years ago. I preached a revival for him in 2002 when he was in Madison County, and wound up going 3 weeks. And prior to that, I would just write a check and that'd been it. But he made a statement multiple nights at that meeting and said, some of you come, this man's helped you and he's been blessed, and you really would want to give him some money, but you really don't want to be able to put it into his hand. And so we're going to pass the plate. And the Lord spoke my heart about that, said listen to that. And that's what from that. And Bud Wishon taught me how to and taking up the offer and explain the expense of that, especially if a man's a full-time evangelist.
Right.
And even if he's a pastor, you want to be kind to him. You mention the same things, but he mentioned, this guy's got a car payment, he's got car insurance, health insurance, he's got living expense, and just share those things with the
What about singers? Is it pretty well a similar situation with that's where I struggle.
Yes, sir.
I had a singing group used to. I never had singing groups. I just got local people sing.
Yeah.
But as of late, I've got to be in some meetings with some singing groups that have got to touch of God on, have them in.
Yeah.
So I called around some local pastors. I'm like, what do you pay singing groups? Because I had no idea. There's not a manual for such things.
That's right.
How do you handle singing groups?
I've always done, as far back as, all the churches I pastored, I've always give a pretty good, decent love offering. It's changed through the years as expenses went up. But when I have a group in, and I've had both what I call the camp meeting circuit type singers, and I've also had the top 40 Southern gospel groups in. I've had both through the years, and I try to give, particularly that camp meeting group, they're going to be with me multiple nights. I would never give them under $1,000, never.
Right.
They've got a family, that's usually a family that's traveling, and to give them that, to help them out for a few days, and then take care of their meals and things of that nature, kind of keep an ear open if they having a need for something, kind of help out with that as well.
So you take care of their expenses as far as their place to stay, food, and then give them no less than $1,000 if it's multiple nights.
Yes, sir, correct.
So let's go back to what you was talking about a moment ago about budgeting out, preparing way ahead.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, number one, you're going to have to know all right, how much a motel is going to cost for set days.
Right.
How many meals are you going to provide?
Yeah.
And then around about what that would cost.
Yeah.
And then what you want to give the preacher. You'd have to have a certain amount, set amount, say whatever, and then sort of take offerings and raise money to that amount.
Yes, sir.
Now, if you got that amount, would you still take up an offering every night during the meeting?
Yes, sir, I would. Just to do something, let those people give extra to that visiting preacher. That's why I would take it up.
You said something a moment ago about you just take the cash, stick it in the man. Do you do that every night or at the end of the week?
Every night, because if he might have an expense that week,
absolutely,
that money could help. So every night I just walk straight to the back and put it in his hand.
It's good too, because being an evangelist for all them years, I experienced this. You cannot deposit a check on Saturday.
Yeah,
right.
And even if you do it with your phone, now when I was there,
you didn't have that option.
I didn't have that option.
Right.
So your mind is trying to how am I going to get to a bank? And as the evangelist, I made sure I had a bank that was at least covered the whole Mid-Atlantic states.
Right.
Because you don't want your local bank, and that be the only one you got, you're going to be in trouble.
Yancey County Bank and Trust or something.
Yes,
not, something like that. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
That's not wise. If you're going to evangelist, don't do it. Get a well-known multiple branches. But the cash is good on Friday night, most definitely, because you've got to get from point A to point B the next day. Saturday's moving day.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so you need some cash.
Right.
And,
now, the meals, as far as how many meals to provide, do you ask them what they would, what they prefer, or do you just this is what we're going to do?
Absolutely. And as the evangelist, I've been on both sides, where you didn't have no choice, and you ate whatever there, or you went hungry, or they'd say, what do y'all like? What I've learned, and in the book I wrote, I put it in there. Talk to that preacher if his family's coming with him. Now, a preacher is a full-time evangelist. I'm going to use, use country talk. They're going to hem and haw on you. In other words, they're not wanting to be fourth.
Right.
They feel bad even talking about it. They will. I promise you. I've been there.
Well, I can just say from personal experience, somebody, most of the time I just say whatever, preacher.
Yep.
Whatever you want.
Yep.
Whatever you want to do. Whatever makes it easier on you is fine with me.
And that's what the vision preacher is going to say. But what I would recommend is tell them what types of food, and as they go and say, listen, do you flat out? I want to answer. Do you like chicken? Do you like fish or seafood? Do you like Mexican? Do you like Chinese?
Do you have an allergy?
Yes, and you bet. And listen, please listen. There are more people with particularly their families, more children today have food allergies than in the history of mankind, probably. I've got 2 granddaughters. One of them is so allergic to peanuts and some things. He even had a medical emergency 2 months ago because of it. You don't want that in the middle of your meeting,
right?
And the preacher don't want that in the middle of the meeting. So it's good. Say it literally. Are you allergic to certain foods? Can you eat? You're all right, eggs and peanuts, and because those are some things that really trigger allergies, to where they need EpiPens and other things like that. So yes, ask them. Does anybody in your family, or who is, and in my case nowadays, 60% of the time, 70% of the time, I travel without my family now, but I have a driver. And if a man's going to have a driver, make sure that man driving don't have allergies either, find out. So I would definitely ask the questions and make them tell you, Pastor, do not take anything. It's fine with me.
Right.
Find out. Even talk to him. What have you been eating a lot of lately?
Right.
Because at one time, now it's a little different. And the pastor's age has a lot to do where you're going to eat.
Right.
Okay. You get burnt out on the road eating certain things all the time.
Yeah.
You're going to go. You don't even have to have the menu. You know what you're going to get. And there's nothing wrong with that. Please don't take me that I'm kicking. I'm not. And those evangelists are not kicking it neither, but you do. And so ask, what have you all had the most of lately?
So some places that I go, the church will feed us prior to the service. How do you feel about that?
I'm great with that. I tell the pastor to pick your best cooks and talk with them, have maybe the pastor's wife, whoever heads those things up for meals, and have a meal plan. That way you do not have the same thing every night. Mm-hmm. I have had that.
Yeah.
I am not telling where it was because I know we're worldwide, but I have preached meetings that literally went multiple weeks. I had chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, and corn. Meat went 10 days, 8 days.
So
8 days out of 10. That is the exact meal I had every night.
When you have a man in
now,
do you personally take him out, or do you give him the money to go out?
I take him out for the fellowship. Mm-hmm. I just always have.
Now, what if he says he wants to go eat? Like you ask him what he likes to eat, and what he says you don't like.
I go with him anyhow. I've learned to eat more myself. I'll find something.
Transitioning into that right there.
All right.
What did you learn about how much the time the evangelist needs to himself versus being, a lot of times I go some places and preach out and the pastor's like, I'll see you tomorrow night at church.
Yep.
And then I go some places and the pastor's like, I'll be at the motel at 8 in the morning.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about that. How much time should the pastor expect to spend with the evangelist from day to day?
Okay. That is a very good question there. I found I'm open with men when I go, and I want to spend some time with the pastor because part of being the guest preacher is trying to minister to that pastor. Yeah. Even if his people never hook with you, they don't have to show up. If you help the pastor, you've helped the church.
Exactly.
And ultimately, you want to help both, yes. But if you can help that pastor, you have achieved something that has eternal value with. I promise you. But when I tell them my study habit is this, me personally, I'll run anywhere you want to till 1 o'clock, and then I'm going back to that hotel or prophet's room, mission. I am barricading myself for prayer, for really getting totally settled on what I'm preaching that night. And I don't come out until supper. If they feed at 5 o'clock or whatever, I'll go eat supper with them. But that is mine. So I always let the pastor know that. Somebody says that's forward. Well, just so they'll know
Right.
my habit. And that's the thing I've always asked him, what do you like to do? I've got preacher friends that they love to go looking, all kind of things. And so I'll run them all day if that's what they want. Because I do have friends that study in the night.
Yeah.
Right.
They'd rather just get out and move around the day. So ask that preacher, what are your habits, your eating times? I have a physical problem. I have a problem with my small intestines that I cannot eat after 7, 8 o'clock at night. It's dangerous for me. A blockage can flare up, and I'm going to wind up in hospital. So I have to let them know, hey, I need to eat by 5 o'clock. Some men cannot eat before they preach.
Right.
Their nerves are such that they can't. Well, so ask them that too.
Let me ask you this. I know there's some men that they work a job.
Yes, sir.
So they cannot take you out before the service.
That's correct.
And the only opportunity they have to be able to take you out is after service.
Yep.
Then how do you maneuver through that?
Well, what I do then, I would go probably to lunch somewhere and buy myself a meal. But after church, I'd go with him. My family can eat.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they're not affected. But I'll either just get something to drink and talk with you, or I found out I can eat a couple of scrambled eggs and it won't bother me at night. Something like that. I can't eat anything with grease. I can't eat anything spicy, but I will go. I'll go fellowship with them. Because, again, that's a major part of the meeting is trying to help the pastor.
Exactly.
So I'll go with him.
I think a lot of men on the road, but they're not conscious of their health.
Right.
And you're eating a lot late at night.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's a mistake that we make sometimes being on the road a whole lot, is not being conscious of that.
Yeah.
And it may lead to trouble later on.
Yes, sir, and that's what happened to me. To the evangelist, you be careful with that. You're not as active because of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So you need to learn how to take care of your health as best you can on the road. But yeah, just ask those guys coming in. Your eating habits, your study habits. Make it as convenient. You don't want to run the guy all day where he's so worried he can't preach. You want him to be rested. You want him to be fresh and ready to give you and give your people something. So it's always good as the pastors say, just ask the preacher, what is your daily routine that works best for you?
Right.
And then, so we've talked about reimbursement paying.
Yeah.
We've talked about food. We've talked about private time. In my mind, there's one more big elephant in the room in evangelism, and that is where you put them.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about that just a little bit because, I have stayed in places that I thought.
Yes, my friend. Oh, yes.
There's no way that the pastor would stay here, but he's got me staying here.
Yep.
So talk about that. Talk about choosing the place.
Okay.
Now, when I stayed with you, brilliant. Yeah. I mean, that place where we stayed this last time,
yes.
Oh my God. I walked in taking pictures of this place, sending it to Rachel. I'm like, look at how bougie this place is.
Years of road experience. Yes, sir. Some guys, when they first take a place, we're all taught, try not to rock the boat, keep things the same, and then through the years you train them to do. So we know that up front. So sometimes somebody else in the church will say, we've always put them over so-and-so.
Right.
We've always stayed there. So you can wind up in a lot of different places, good, bad, ugly, all that. I'm going to be real open on this one because if a man cannot sleep, he cannot function, he cannot get his mind wrapped around what he's going to preach, he's going to have a lot of problems for the week. I've stayed a lot of places, prophets' rooms, mission houses, hotels.
People's homes
a few times. I don't do that.
Yeah.
I've quit that 100%.
So they say we got somebody in the church, you just say, I can't do that.
I will tell them up front, and I'll tell them I'll pay for my own room.
Right.
I'm such a private person.
Right.
In the day and time we're in, for testimony's sake. Here's what I say, because I'm like you, I've stayed in all of them. I've stayed in the Sunday school room class deal where they put a bed in a Sunday school class. And someone has had the idea, we've put a shower in the men's bathroom. And but what the problem with that is, you're in the north side in the Sunday school room, and the bathroom is on the south side of the building. Right. And the light switch is not in the hall on your side. Right. It's down there near the bathroom. Yeah. Right. So you, back before phones had lights on, you have your flashlight, and you wander through the dark and things of that nature. And then, so that's not a good idea. Right. He cannot rest. You have all the noises that buildings make and creak and pop. And then if you got staff at these churches, they forget, they do their routine, they go through a building, blah, 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 you know. And for your wife and your children, everybody's having to get dressed to go down the hall, you know, instead of being right there at your room type thing. So I never recommend that. If you can get out of that, don't do that for that business. Do not do that. I know there are those cases, and I promise you, all of us as vision preachers, we'll do what we got to do. When my family's with me, I am going to, if I have to go pay for my own room, I will. When I'm by myself, maybe not as much, but though that's not a good idea. Right. It's just not. It's if it can be next to if the restroom and it's together, that's fine. And
I read a story one time about Dale Moody. He said he was getting on this train, and the man that he was with turned left to go toward the coach, and he turned right to go toward the sleeping units. And that man looked at Mr. Moody. He said, "I'm saving the Lord's money." And Mr. Moody looked back at him. And he said, "I'm saving the Lord's servant."
Yes, sir.
And there's a lot of truth to that.
Yes,
so
sir.
If you're going to do a prophet's chamber, and I've been in some prophet's chambers that are nicer than motel rooms. I mean,
absolutely.
Ken Bowman down there,
hands down.
I'd rather stay
like
in
a Hampton Inn, son. Like a Hampton Inn.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to what you said there a moment ago about when you take a church and they say, "This is where we always put men."
Go look at it. You take your wife.
That's
and
good.
Okay, okay, Pastor. Take your wife, because she gonna tell you if she'd stay there.
Yeah,
right. She needs to go look at it with you, and she'll say this ain't gonna work. Because here's the thing: places you've used over and over and over again through the years, do they keep it up?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Do they remodel every 10, 20 years? Or has it been the same since 1955?
Right.
Okay.
So
you get in that, you've got smells, you've got.
And the same is true for prophet's chambers,
yes,
right?
Sir. Keep
you should
them
let
updated.
the women look at your
absolutely.
It shouldn't be furniture from the 1970s.
No. Somebody don't need to bring something they don't want no more to drop off at the church to put in there.
So as far as a motel goes, is there certain layouts of motels that you avoid?
Yes, sir, there is. If as the host pastor, and again, small towns are always going to have an exception rule to it, so keep that in mind. I will not put a guy, if I can help it, in a hotel that does not have an elevator, because everybody can't pull luggage up there. You say, "Well, I'm just going to go help them." I just go, wait just a minute on that one too. Are you private?
Yeah.
Right. What kind of person are you? I'm a real private person.
I am too.
I'm meticulous on even how I pack my vehicle and all that. Right. So go if you can, and if you can help it, and you can have one of it, do that. If it has to be that, work real hard with that. The manager, I need a first floor room.
Right. Well, that's good. Never thought about it.
Yeah.
So we have that problem.
You get an aged man.
Right. Yes.
Get an aged man. He gonna have issues.
You talking about small towns? That's where
That's where you're at. Yes, sir.
we got one motel. It's pretty clean, but it's not like a national.
Right.
And a lot of times I tell preachers, I'm gonna put you in the Carolina country, and they're like, ooh,
Yeah,
it's nice. It's nice.
Absolutely. I've stayed there.
Yeah. But what I have started doing, and tell me what you think about this, I put a lot of preachers in VRBOs.
Oh, yes, sir. Man, can I say something about that? That's an ideal place. If a man's traveling with his family, those are ideal. And here's why. As the preacher, when you wanting to study, there will be a room you can go to,
Right.
and keep everybody else on the other side of that
Right.
place. And so you got your alone time more. Now, on the road life, I learned to zone my family out. I can sit in the middle of them, and they can be running a three-ring circus, and I'm fine. But I do enjoy it better having that, go to the living room of that place, or go to the kitchen and throw all my books on the table.
Do you enjoy one of those now when you're traveling by yourself?
yeah,
Do you
yes,
enjoy
right.
one of those more than a hotel or a motel?
I'm fine either way with them when I'm by myself.
And typically I have found, okay, if I'm going to bring a big family in, then I'm going to have to get 2 or 3 motel rooms.
Yes, sir, you
By
are.
the time you do that,
Yeah.
the VRBO's cheaper anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And you just, like I said, the key, go check all these places out. Make sure they are what they're advertising. Every manager of a hotel will let you see a room. Mm-hmm. They want your business. Yeah, absolutely. Give me a second. Now get a key, notate your room.
Don't
Show the
just
layout.
read the reviews.
No, sir. Don't just go with that by itself. As the pastor, you need to go look at it. And I have an assistant, so he goes with me and things as well. Prior to that, it would have been my wife with me. I broke my nose in high school. I can't smell. If I smell it, you're going to be gagging.
Right.
It's real bad if I smell something. But you don't want odors, and you want to make sure the mattresses are good, and because if a man can't sleep, again, he ain't going to be able to study or preach as well as he could.
Have you ever gotten into bed bugs on the road?
Not yet. I have heard the horror tales of it.
Thank the Lord for that.
It is always a nerve. That is nerve wracking. That is. I have seen cockroaches. I have experienced that.
I've woken up and been just eat up.
Yep.
Is there a chain of motels that you feel more comfortable when somebody says, we're putting you in you're like, oh, well, that'll be nice.
Yep. By and large, Hampton's the same every town. Comfort Inn are a whole lot the same wherever you go. Mm-hmm. You got
I found Fairfields.
Things by Hilton are all pretty much all the same.
Mm-hmm. Right. So one last question for you, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut this, and then we'll start a new podcast, and we'll talk about the flip side of that, what the evangelist needs to do for the pastor.
That'd be good.
But so let me ask you one last question. Does your church typically do a welcome basket in the room? And if so, how do you determine what you're going to put in that? And talk to us about that a little bit.
Yes, sir, we do that because I learned that on the road. I had never done that in early years of pastoring, but as I traveled, we go, here's this big basket. You contact the visiting preacher and his family. Tell me what kind of drinks do you like, waters, sodas, what kind of snacks. Do you eat fruit? Do you not eat fruit? Again, talk allergies with them. I also, and I learned this on the road, I usually get gift cards for the children, $25, $30 gift card for them for Walmart. I'll try to find out what the preacher's wife likes, get her a $50 card or a $100 card to whatever, whether Cato's, Belk's, something like that. Love on their family. They are neglected. Not that preacher's not keeping the money he's getting from them, but they're there. It's nice for them to be acknowledged that they're there, and you're glad they're there, and love on them. When I went in evangelism, things like that meant my children. My oldest girl would have been 13 when I went to full-time evangelism. Elijah was 10. They were things that made their day,
right?
Because they thought these things are over with.
Just this last year, I went to preach for Brother Seth Siswell. We sat down at his church, and they just started bringing my wife stuff. They
Yep.
brought her a
Yeah.
basket from the church. They brought her homemade bread.
Yep.
Some lady brought her a bag that they'd sewed
Yes,
up.
sir, buddy.
And she looked at me. Well, it took us 2 loads to carry the stuff out.
Yeah.
She looked at me and she said, "We've got to do better."
Yeah.
So now,
Amen.
ever since, everybody we've had in, Rachel and my daughter Reagan, they fix up a basket for the pastor's wife, to give them.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important. I think
It is. It just encourages them. Here's what you have: road life is not a constant vacation.
Yeah.
That is the biggest misconception. How you got it made? No, you don't have it made. Your body's taking a beating. Every week you're moving, and it helps the families out considerably. The thoughtfulness. Again, I learned that on the road, and since I took Gateway, that's what I've been doing. We do things for the families, and I've been churches where they had a different basket every night. Your first night would be your waters and your sodas and snacks, just a few things, or fruit. The next night they'd come in with just a little, like use homemade breads, things like that. Maybe one night would just be things that would go towards your kids and just towards your kids. Just and depending on their age, what would be in the basket.
Right.
Whether you're talking toys or are you talking about, notebooks and, other little things. But there's a lot of things you can do that is very important. That encourages that family.
I remember when we started on the road years ago, that a pastor got my wife up and took up an offering for her. And I remember him saying, this is not for your husband. This is not for your kids. This is not for traveling expenses.
Yep.
This is for
sir.
you. And to this day, she never has forgot that. This day. And that meant a lot. And I remember us going to the prophet's chamber after that. And we were changing and getting on the road and going to somewhere else. And I remember her just sitting and just weeping and crying that they done that for her. That meant so much to her.
Oh, yes, sir. It goes above and beyond. I'll give this illustration, and there's one more thing I'd like to share with pastors on this section before we move on. But with that, when we first went into evangelism, I resigned in October. A guy booked me for the Sunday before Christmas, and I did that for him every year till I come off the road. One of the things that pierced my heart when I resigned in 2010 was my little boy that night, praying with him, getting ready to tuck him in the bed. He's 10 years old, so you got to remember that. He's 10 years old. And he looks at me in my eyes and he said, "Daddy, I'll never be in another Christmas play." And I kept my face, I wanted to just totally break. It tore my heart apart.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that preacher, he didn't know that, but he offered. My kids are outgoing, so they made friends pretty quick. And they're having play practice and eating pizza, so they stayed. And the preacher took it out. When I come back, they wrote my boy into the Christmas play.
What about that?
Just give him a part.
Right.
They also was a church that exchanged gifts from Sunday school classes, and so I was asked to give them some ideas, and they were going to get a gift. One. That's how it was addressed to me. I said, fine. And I explained that to my kids because of the age group again. Come that night, we come back. Yeah, Abad's in it. He's beaming. I'm thrilled, man. I'm thrilled. Then after everything's done, the fellowship time, and everybody's and they get the gift, and I'm sitting there and I'm just watching, and they're bringing stuff to my family, and I turn around and my oldest girl is bawling, and I'm thinking, what's wrong? And I looked at her and said, "Girl, what in the world's wrong?" She said, "Daddy, I wasn't supposed to get but one gift." And she's got 15 or 20.
Wow.
How about that?
Just simple things. It helps the family.
That's something right there. Something I've never even thought about is how that the kids of evangelists don't have a church really, a home
do
church
not.
that they go to.
They don't get to do any kind of youth activities much. I preach them. I'm a pastor and I'm a / evangelist still. I preach a revival out in Crossville, Tennessee. This will be my third, fourth year. First year ever going there. They know I have a teenage daughter. She would have been 13 at that time. And they plan an activity with her every day. They went putt-putting one day. They went hiking one day. Just things just to help get that kid out of that hotel room.
Right. That's good.
And just things like that. Just thoughtfulness for a family.
They have a home church. They're just gone somewhere.
That's exactly right. You don't get to be involved in the things.
Right. So your book that you wrote, The Do's and Don'ts, is there any do's or don'ts that we haven't covered yet?
Here's one thing I stress to you as a pastor having a man, especially if it's the first time you've ever had him in. Begin to talk about him to your congregation. Let them know some things about him. Let them know the reason you got him. He's preached, you've heard him. He's done it. What he preached helped you. It made a difference with you. Let them know the kind of man he is. Now, this fella's going to get, they explain this about me. He going to turn blood red.
Right.
He going to sweat bad. Right. He going to be from the front to the back of the building. He's not dying. He's breathing. He's all right.
Right.
And then there's other guys, I would say, and I have many in, this fellow's reserved, but he is going to give you the book. Give them some ideas about the man. And begin getting your people prepared for it. Have them praying, whether it's revival or if it's one Sunday. Begin say, hey, let's make an effort. Let's all be here. Let's invite somebody. Let's bathe this thing in prayer. And we all know, and especially in a meeting, there's never been a revival without prayer. Never.
Amen.
And so those kinds of things is very helpful. Prepare your people for the Pope.
We had Justin Cooper in. I told him, I said, this guy's going to preach like a machine gun.
Yes, sir.
You better listen fast because he preaches fast.
He does.
And I got them prepared, like you said, prepared for that.
Yes, sir.
So that they were in tune when it come time.
That's right. So just things like that.
Right.
Sometimes that cuts out a lot of your, if they don't know anything about you, the first service is just a filler service. They're filling you out. Yeah. They're trying to.
And we're all mountain men.
Yeah.
And in the mountains, they are going, if they don't know anything about you, and the preacher ain't even told you nothing, they are going to sit there and look at you.
Yeah.
They just won't know what kind of fella is this? Is he really here to help us? Or is he here going to try to kill us, Yeah.
Right.
And so you can get putting dents in them barriers leading up if you share those kinds of things.
That's a good idea.
Well, this has been a great conversation, and we're going to have another conversation that'll run next week dealing with the evangelist and his dealings with the pastor. But where can people go to find out more about your book, more about your work? Where can they find one of those books?
If they'll look up Gateway Baptist Church in Bowling Springs, South Carolina, and there's a little place you can click on to send me an email if you're interested in this Do's and Don'ts books. I'd be glad to send it to
So the
you.
website, it's not Gateway Baptist Church, is it? It's Gateway Jubilee.
Well, it is now, Gateway
okay.
Baptist Church. We switched things over. So Gateway Baptist Church, and type in Bowling Springs, South Carolina. I believe it actually says Gateway Baptist Church SC now, I think. It's the actual web. But if
you fail to search, Gateway Baptist Church, Bowling Springs.
My name, either one, it'll bring it up.
Outstanding. All right. Well, until next time, remember, strengthen the things that remain. We'll see you then.